It's always great to catch up with my next guest from the property landscape to the beehive and beyond. It's a very good afternoon to market and political commentator Ashley Church. Hello.
So I always thought grandmasters were the Masons, and I thought the Masons were only for blokes. So I'm not quite sure what's coming up. I can't wait to hear.
As a Mason, they call the Grand Master. I did not know that.
So. Yeah, I think so. So what are you trying to tell us?
Well, no, actually, I'll tell you. Ashley, I went to see the people that are making my new crowns for my teeth.
Oh my goodness!
Not as exciting as you might think now, but
and it's not Thailand or Vietnam.
No, I didn't go. I didn't go there. But I mean, these crowns that I'm getting done, I've got. They were 35 years old and long past there, use by date, and so I have temporaries in, and I had to go and get them colour matched, which I have not done obviously in 35 years, to a place yesterday, and when I walked into their little studio, the guy that was talking to me and me was, going over what they're going to do, and he couldn't believe I'd had them in for 35 years and, crowns have changed a lot in 3 decades. I said, I bet. And then he said, well, I'm going to take you over to the Grand Master. And I was like, oh, wow.
Oh, my goodness.
And
was he wearing a kimono? And
yeah, it was pretty well. He was a little Asian man that bowed at me, and I thought, and apparently he's the best of the best. So, look, I cannot wait to get my new chompers, Ash, because they're going to look amazing.
So when you do this, it's always videoed. So I'm going to be very keen to see what it looks like next time I see. Yeah.
You'll say to me, Leah, can you stop grinning like a Cheshire cat? We can see your teeth.
No, I won't. I promise I won't.
Yeah, it's quite serious, and stop grinning, because that's what I'll end up doing. All right, look, we're not talking teeth. We're moving on. Ashley, can we start with the year? We're going to start with property. And at the start of the year, we did experience some stability, but also a mix of performances from region to region. Some examples, Wellington saw a 2.7% quarterly decline. Tauranga and Hamilton experienced drops of about 2.3%. But in contrast, we had regions such as Christchurch and Dunedin, who showed more resilience with modest decreases of only 0.7% and 1.4% respectively. What factors do you think are contributing to the regional disparities in house price movements across the country?
Yeah, so the first thing I have to say, sadly, is that this is a very, very good case study in why to be a little bit cautious about taking any one of these reports as gospel. So the one that you're referring to comes from QV, which is the government-owned valuation agency, and that one indicates that house prices are currently sitting, I think, on average across the country at about 903,000. So average price value of about 903, different in the regions, but that's the overall. And indicating, as you quite correctly say, that they have dropped over the last 12 months. Contrast that against CoreLogic, which is another reputable agency, coming out last week saying that over the period between January 2024 and January 2025, they had increased over that same period. Now, here's the difference, though. They're saying that they've increased from 812 to 816. So you've got one saying that they're down at 903, and another one saying they're up from 800. Now, here's the really frustrating thing for your listeners.
Yeah.
You might say, well, which of those is correct? And the frustrating answer is they both are. And the reason that they both are is because they'll be measuring different things. And I don't know until you get into the weeds and actually work out what it is that they're measuring, it's almost impossible to actually know what that means. So what it means for your listeners is when you hear these reports, take 3 or 4 of them over a period of time as an aggregate rather than just taking one as gospel, because that's what happens.
Interesting. Well, I'll take the one that gives me the most money.
Right.
That's the one I want for properties.
I think we all do.
Yeah.
Well, by the way, just with respect to your question, which is why would that be happening up or down? Yeah. It's really just that weird period that you and I have talked about before we're in at the moment, which is we're past that period of steadily declining property values. We've been in this sort of no man's land for about 12 months. There's no question that house prices are going to increase. It's just basically we're all waiting to see who's going to blink first.
Yeah. Can we talk auctions, Ash? Because I mean, I've been to a few auctions and they were exciting and heartbreaking when when you lose a house that you want.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
recent property auctions have seen a noticeable slowdown. There's been a significant decrease in both the number of properties offered up and the success rate of sales. In the latest auctions, only 37% of properties sold under the hammer. What do you think's behind the drop? Because I mean, in my day when we went to auctions, it was the only way to sell your house.
Yeah, so interesting you should say that. So during the last 2 or 3 years, options have actually fallen away as a sales technique, which so when you look at this article that you're talking about, it's actually praising the fact that they're up. They're up from a much lower base. And the reason they would have dropped away is that over that period of time, there's two reasons you would use an auction as a seller. You would either use an auction in a really hot market, and the reason you use them in that market is because they maximise competition. You get all the people in the room. Basically, you get a bit more. The other reason that they're used is favoured by real estate agents themselves, and that is when you can't get a seller to accept that their property value is not what they think it is. You get them into an auction situation because what happens is they don't get what they want, and then the agent can say, "Well, look, the market's spoken. Clearly, you need to bring your price down." And so people have got wind of that over the last few years, and they've basically shied away from auctions and looked at other ways of selling because they didn't want to get into a situation where the agent was. And don't get me wrong, I'm not blaming agents for that. It's a legitimate way of getting people to recognise that they're perhaps being a little bit unrealistic. So this article you're referring to actually indicates that auctions are up. So it's basically saying that at 37%, they're higher than they've been for the last few years. The clearance rate on them is higher than it's been for the last few years, and it's been consistent for the last few months. Now, that indicates one of two things is happening. Either it indicates, again, that the market's recovering and that this is good news and that we're in the midst of an increase in property values, or it indicates, and we know this to be partially true, it indicates that more people are putting their properties on the market because they realise that house prices have stopped dropping, and that once they get to the auction room, they're now prepared to accept whatever reality the auction actually presents to them and accept the price. And I suspect it's a mixture of both. So you're probably finding that some people are getting better prices than they might have got a year ago. Other people are going to auction because they're frustrated that they need to get rid of their property, and they're basically accepting that perhaps the property isn't worth what it was back in 2022. So again, it's symptomatic of a change in the market that we haven't actually got through yet.
Yeah. Interesting. A group representing property investors is hopeful that the government's new granny flat policy will provide a much needed boost to the housing supply for the country. Plan law change would allow homeowners to build granny flats up to 70 square metres without the need for a building consent. Do you think, Ash, the new granny flat rules will impact the housing market?
I do, and I think this is great. So it's not new. It was, if you go back a few years, and I know in Auckland, and I suspect in other parts of the country, there used to be something called minor dwellings. And this is back prior to the super city. So remember there were seven cities on the east, and some of them, I know West Auckland did it. I think Manukau accepted what was called minor dwellings, which is essentially what these things are. They were smaller dwellings on your property, and there was a right to build them up to a certain size. And so as a result of that, you got a proliferation of these things, and property investors loved them because it meant if you had a bigger piece of land than you needed to accommodate one home or even your own home, then you had the ability to build one of these things and you could rent it out or provide a banana and a dotage. So I think they will do exactly what this Coot from Property Investors Association is indicating. They will provide another form of property investment where people can get in, because in this case, remember, you're not having to buy the land; you're only having to basically build the dwelling. And it's a smaller dwelling, so it's not going to cost you as much. I think I saw figures of 13,000 of these things expected over the next few years. I think that's probably on the light side.
I mean, if you're allowed to build them,
absolutely. And I have to say, in regard to some of the changes being made by this government around housing, this is a really good example of the sort of thing that they're doing, and it's just good, common sense, smart stuff.
What did you make of then the, actually it was only just recently announced about bringing in Chris Pink announced it last week. There was a flurry of announcements last week about giving the thumbs up to buildings, alternative suppliers to come into New Zealand. And he said they might start with a new, different kind of jib, concrete. And by June, we could see, 12,000 products. And then by the end of the year, 250,000 building products on the market.
That's interesting. I didn't see that, and I do know that they were talking about Jib just not long after they came into government, and the reason for that was because Jib was seen as holding a bit of a stranglehold on the market.
Yeah, yeah.
Because there was no competitive product. So I assume
Correct.
It's a continuation of that. And that's got to be good. I mean, competition's good.
Yes.
In theory, that will bring the price down.
Yep.
And so for developers and indeed just for people doing renovations, that's got to be a good thing. So I didn't get the story that you're referring to, but based on what you've described,
it's a lot of products.
Anything bad about that? Absolutely, fantastic.
Might get my granny flat built on top of my garage. Ashley, that's the
and
wish.
Yet, you're not quite ready. You're not in your dotage yet, Leah.
Well, no.
You've got to sort of wait till
Oh no!
I want to build your crowns done.
I'm just building my teeth up now. I'm moving into a granny flat. No. I want to build it to put my studio in it, to move my platform studio into build a proper studio. Yeah, like a slap.
Put a neon sign that people could see from the road. I can imagine it now.
You could when you come to Auckland, Ashley, you could come into a purposely built studio with a waiting lounge and a wine bar. I mean, come on.
You've given me a reason to travel.